Take 4. This is different. I'm accustomed to teaching a Bible class in a room that has people in it. Preaching a sermon where there are people listening live. And I make no guarantee that I'm going to excel at this form of presentation. It's a new thing, new experience, breaking new ground. I don't think I've ever sat alone in the building staring into the screen of my phone as I record myself giving a Bible lesson. So we're in unexplored territory. I hope it goes well. This is further than I've made it in any of the previous takes. So bear with me. It is such a strange time in which we live. Extraordinary circumstances. I've not seen anything like it. I assume that you haven't either. I told Sherry yesterday, they started out telling us not to get in large groups. And then they told us, well, not even small groups are allowed. And then they said, stay home. Don't go out at all. And my prediction is that the next executive order coming down the pike will simply be stay in bed. If we all just stay in bed, then maybe we'll get through this faster. I was in bed the other day, awake, thinking, as sometimes happens, and I got to thinking about a character in the Bible who couldn't go out. And I thought, let's just explore that for a little bit. His story is in the Old Testament, and his name was Shimei. I may not be pronouncing it the way he would have, but I expect if he saw my name in print, he might mispronounce my name too. But Shimei is the way I've always said it, and that's the way I'll say it this morning. But let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 16. If you'll get your Bible. Go ahead, get your Bible. We'll wait. Second Samuel 16 is where we are introduced to this fellow. And I want to read the verses that introduce him to us. 2 Samuel 16, verses 5 through 13. And then we'll read some more after that. Verse 5. When King David came to Bahurim, there came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. And as he came, he cursed continually. So right off the bat, we see that his behavior is less than exemplary. He comes out continually cursing. Verse 6, and he threw stones at David and at all the servants of King David. And all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. So you got to have a bit of nerve to be throwing stones at the man who is the king, or at least you thought he was until recently. And he's surrounded by these extraordinary warriors. And you may be familiar with David's mighty men. No weaklings they. And any one of them would have had the capacity, I assume, to go and deal with this man. But he thinks his position is strong enough because David has been so weakened, and he's gotten enough nerve up to go out and actually curse and throw stones at David. Even when he's not alone, David is surrounded by mighty soldiers. Look at verse 7. And Shimei said as he cursed, get out, you man of blood, you worthless man. The Lord has avenged on you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. See, your evil is on you, for you are a man of blood. So that's what Shimei did, and that's what he had to say. That David is a wicked person, and that David is getting his comeuppance. And of course, this man, Shimei, is connected to Saul. Now, David replaced Saul, and Saul was taken out of the way by God and replaced with a man after God's own heart, who was David. So I can see from that viewpoint that Shimei might not be the biggest fan of David, because Shimei's connection is to Saul. And yet his behavior, we would have to say, is inexcusable. Verse 9, then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah. Now remember, Zeruiah was David's sister. And so Abishai would be one of David's nephews. And Abishai says to King David, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and take off his head. But the king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord has said to him, curse David, who then shall say, why have you done so? And David said to Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my own son seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjaminite? Leave him alone, and let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look on the wrong done to me, and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing today. So David and his men went on the road, while Shimei went along on the hillside opposite him, and cursed as he went, and threw stones at him, and flung dust. So he's just acting like a man out of control and angry as can be, if not happy at the circumstance that David now finds himself in. And Shimei is ecstatic that David's kingdom seems to be over. And so he's cursing the king, and one of David's men says, let me go over there and kill him. That was Abishai. David says, no. Maybe I've got this coming to me. You know, it may be that the Lord told him to do that. Maybe this is what I deserve. And if that's not the case, then God can still take care of it, because God sees what's happening. And if God thinks I don't deserve this treatment, then God may repay me later with something good for the pain that I'm having to endure right now. It's just quite an attitude. David's instinct was not to lash out. Abishai's instinct, of course, was to protect the king, to protect the honor of the king. But the king was not in a very enviable position, and his situation had changed drastically, and he knows it's my own son who is trying to take the kingdom. And that's the context of this whole story. The attempted coup carried out by David's son Absalom. Now, you remember back in David's history, and he had committed adultery with Bathsheba, and in the aftermath of that, the son that was born to them died, and God also told David that from now on the sword is not going to depart from your house. And so here's the playing out of what God had prophesied. And from David's own family, his own son, Absalom, now is trying to tear the kingdom away. And David's life, in fact, is in jeopardy. He had known what it was like to be in danger often from King Saul while Saul was still alive. But now he's having to learn what it's like to be in danger from his own son, who wants him dead and who wants the crown on his own head. So that's the context. And you can't help but be struck by the fact that Shimei's act is such a far cry from the way David ever dealt with Saul. You know how many times Saul was practically given into the hand of David, and David was in a position to harm Saul or to even kill him, and David would never take the opportunity. He would always say, no, Saul is the Lord's anointed. I'm not going to stretch my hand out against the Lord's anointed. That's not my place, David always thought. Well, Shimei thought it was his place. And the Lord's anointed in the form of King David, Shimei evidently had no problem striking out against him, cursing him, throwing rocks at him, insulting him, calling him evil. Let's go a few chapters further. You might think, well, okay, that's our introduction to Shimei. That's what he did. That's the end of his story. But that's not the end of his story. He comes back. 2 Samuel chapter 19. Let's go there. Verses 16 through 23. Read with me. And Shimei, the son of Gera, the Benjaminite, from Bahurim, hurried to come down with the men of Judah to meet King David. Now, what has happened in the meantime? What happened was Absalom was defeated. In fact, Absalom is dead now. The rebellion, the attempted coup, has been put down. The rebellion is crushed. David is back in his rightful place as the king, and he's being recognized now as the king again. And so things are back under control. And Shimei knows what he did when it looked like David had lost the kingdom. So here comes Shimei, and he's got a different attitude this time. He comes out to meet King David. Verse 17, and with him were 1,000 men from Benjamin. And Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, with his 15 sons and his 20 servants, rushed down to the Jordan before the king, and they crossed the ford to bring over the king's household and to do his pleasure. And Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king as he was about to cross the Jordan, and said to the king, verse 19, this is what Shimei says to David, let not my lord hold me guilty, or remember how your servant did wrong on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. Do not let the king take it to heart, for your servant knows that I have sinned. Therefore, behold, I have come this day, the first of all the house of Joseph, to come down to meet my lord the king. So Shimei seems a different person in this context, where David's kingdom has been reasserted, and it's obvious that Absalom is not going to become king. But Shimei had cursed King David. And so now he comes back all contrite. Oh, don't take to heart what I did to you just recently, and what I called you, and the rocks I threw at you, the insults I hurled. I was wrong when I did that. I was sinning against you, but here I am admitting that I was wrong, and I don't want you to seek vengeance on me because of, look, I'm the first one from my kinsmen to come out here and to greet you. We're here for you, David. How sincere Shimei was may be up for speculation. I guess we can give him the benefit of the doubt if we choose to go that far. It's in light of the curses that he was hurling, it might seem like back in chapter 16 we are exposed to the real Shimei, and maybe in chapter 19 we are exposed to the desperate Shimei who's looking out for his own hide. That may be the case. Or maybe, for all we know, maybe he was feeling genuine regret. Whether it reached the point of repentance, I can't say. But look at verse 21. Now here's Abishai again. Back in chapter 16, Abishai, one of David's soldiers, when Shimei curses, and Abishai says to David, do you want me to go over and take his head off? David says no. And so it's interesting that in chapter 19, when Shimei's not cursing, now he's begging forgiveness. And there's Abishai again. King David, do you want me to kill this man? So in both cases, Abishai is at the ready to strike Shimei down. So verse 21, 2 Samuel 19:21, Abishai the son of Zeruiah answered, shall not Shimei be put to death for this? Because he cursed the Lord's anointed. Abishai remembers what Shimei did. David does too. But David said, verse 22, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should this day be as an adversary to me? Shall anyone be put to death in Israel this day? For do I not know that I am this day king over Israel? And the king said to Shimei, You shall not die. And the king gave him his oath. Well, that's pretty significant then. If the king gives his word, and the king even gives his word in the form of an oath, Shimei, you're not going to die. David is confident in his reestablished position as king. He realizes the rebellion is gone, the threat is over, and he wasn't in the mood to put to death this man who had so recently cursed him. Shimei, David was in a magnanimous mood, I suppose. Look, I'm king. The rebellion's over. Let's let the bloodshed end. Shimei, I'll let you live. And so we might think, okay, well, the story of Shimei, that's interesting. He sinned against David, but then he came back and he sought forgiveness, and David extended it. And so the story of Shimei is over, right? But it's not. He comes back up again. Let's go over to 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. Now, this is years later. In fact, this is the end of David's kingdom, David's reign, at least. It's the end of David's life. And before David died, he had certain pieces of wisdom and bits of instruction to pass along to his son Solomon, who was about to succeed him as king. And so, as a part of the very last things that David ever does, he has some instruction to give to Solomon before Solomon takes over the reins of power. And of all things, at the end of David's life, however many years later it is, and you would think, the most important things you would be saying to your son when you have come to the point of practically your dying breath, surely it wouldn't be Shimei on David's mind, but it was. In part, it was. And so 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, look at this. This is David talking to Solomon before Solomon becomes king. David says, "And there is also with you Shimei, the son of Gera, the Benjaminite from Bahurim, who cursed me with a grievous curse on the day when I went to Mahanaim. But when he came down to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put you to death with the sword. Now, therefore, do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man. You will know what you ought to do to him, and you shall bring his gray head down with blood to Sheol." Now think of that. At the end of his life, David remembered what Shimei had done. Even though he had promised to let Shimei live, he never forgot the way he was treated by Shimei. And so, in David's mind, David had given his word that he was not going to kill Shimei, but he had not promised that nobody else would. And so, as he's about to leave Solomon the kingdom, he says, "Now, Solomon, son, remember that man. Remember what he did. He cursed me grievously. And Solomon, you're a wise man." Imagine saying that to Solomon. "Solomon, you're a wise man. I trust you to know what you ought to do about Shimei." And as if that wasn't enough of a hint, David goes on and basically spells it out. You're going to bring his gray head down with blood to Sheol. I don't know any other way to take that other than that David is saying to Solomon, I want you to kill him. I want Shimei dead. And I can't do it because I made him a promise, but you can do it. And you're smart. You'll figure out a way. So Shimei is still in the story. Well, that's not the end of it either. Let's go to the same chapter further down and pick up our reading in verse 36. Verses 36 through basically the think it's the end of the chapter. Then the king sent and summoned Shimei and said to him, now this is Solomon calling Shimei to come. And Solomon says, build yourself a house in Jerusalem and dwell there, and do not go out from there to any place whatever. Now, here's where we may be able to begin to identify with Shimei. Here in Denton County, under a stay-at-home order, stay at home. Now, here's a fella in the Old Testament, and basically that's what he's told. Shimei, build yourself a house in Jerusalem and stay at home. That is, do not go out of the city. Stay-at-home order for Shimei. Verse 37, Solomon continues his instruction. For on the day you go out and cross the brook Kidron, know for certain that you shall die. Your blood shall be on your own head. That's pretty serious. It's going to be a capital crime. Thankfully, it's not that severe here. It's not a capital crime to leave your house. But Solomon explains to Shimei, it is going to be a capital crime if I ever find out that you left Jerusalem. So build yourself a new house and stay there. Verse 38, and Shimei said to the king, what you say is good. As my lord the king has said, so will your servant do. So Shimei lived in Jerusalem many days. I don't know how many. I do know how many days, roughly. It will happen to be 3 years. So that's a good amount of time to get used to a routine and a stay-at-home order. I don't think ours is going to last that long. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. It won't be 3 years. But Shimei lived there. He agreed with the king. What else could he do? I mean, in his position, you're not going to take exception to the king. You're not going to argue with Solomon. He couldn't say, no, you've got me wrong. I never did that to your father, because he did. He had. He was guilty. And all he can do is accept the terms. And so he does. Well, look at verse 39. But it happened at the end of 3 years that 2 of Shimei's servants ran away to Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath. And when it was told Shimei, behold, your servants are in Gath. Verse 40, Shimei arose and saddled a donkey and went to Gath to Achish to seek his servants. Shimei went and brought his servants from Gath. And when Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and returned, the king sent and summoned Shimei and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord and solemnly warn you, saying, know for certain that on the day you go out and go to any place whatever, you shall die? And you said to me, what you say is good. I will obey. Verse 43. Why then have you not kept your oath to the Lord and the commandment with which I commanded you? The king also said to Shimei, you know in your own heart all the harm that you did to my father David. So the Lord will bring back your harm on your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. Then the king commanded Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and he went and struck him down, and he died. And that is the end of the story of Shimei. Are you surprised at how many verses are given to his story? I think it is a bit surprising. And if you count them up, I believe the number of verses that we just read was 30 verses scattered across 3 different chapters in the Bible. Do you know how many significant things are recorded in the Bible in far fewer than 30 verses? I couldn't even begin to tell you. 30 verses are given in the context of relating to us the story of Shimei. And as you think about his story and what happened to him when Solomon took over, do you think that he was being set up? It does kind of look like that, doesn't it? that Solomon is setting up Shimei to fail. And maybe that's not far from the mark to say it that way, but it is still the case that it was Shimei's choice, wasn't it? Even if the situation were constructed in such a way as it looks like you're just waiting for Shimei to trip up, but at least he's not in prison. In fact, he's got a new house. Not only is he not put in prison, he's not told by Solomon, Shimei, I want you to go and live in this cardboard box. You're not going to get anything better than that. Or Shimei, I want you to go dig a hole in the ground. You're going to live in that the rest of your life. Or Shimei, I'm going to lock you behind bars the rest of your life. He wasn't told any of that. He was told in Jerusalem, Shimei, I want you to build a new house. A new house. All I ask is that you stay there. You don't go out as far as to leave Jerusalem. Stay within Jerusalem. That's all he had to do. But you see, since he wasn't in prison, he had freedom. He had the prospect of moving about if he wanted to. And it was that freedom that got him into trouble, because Solomon didn't take away his ability to leave. In fact, he held out that possibility with the instruction that you not do it. And that put Shimei in position of having to make a choice. Well, what did the man deserve after all? I mean, look what he had done to the Lord's anointed, King David, ancestor to our Savior, and the way he treated him so horribly. Maybe he was being set up, but Solomon could have just come right out and took his head off right then and there at the beginning. Shimei did get 3 more years to live before he made that fateful mistake and left. But then I think about us and about the devil. And is that not what the devil tries to do to us? Is that not what he's continually doing? He's trying to set us up to fail, trying to arrange circumstances, maybe in whatever ways are at his disposal. I can't tell you how all he works in any given circumstance or in any circumstance, and what all assets he has at his disposal to use in his effort to get us to sin. But wouldn't that be his fondest wish? To somehow get us set up to fail. Put us in a situation where we can choose between good and evil, and he's there egging us on to choose the evil. The devil is there, with encouragement to go ahead and cross that boundary. Just like Shimei decided, I'm going to go ahead and cross the brook Kidron. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to leave Jerusalem. Got to get my servants back. That's like the devil egging us on. If did God say don't cross that line? That's not so serious after all. Did God say I want you to worship this way? He wasn't. He didn't mean that. He doesn't mean you can never change things up or put your own ideas in there, your own way of expressing your praise to God. Maybe you just ignore the boundary, act like it's not there, step across it. Shimei came to a point where he took a step that was the step too far. He had gone too far, and he couldn't go back to what he had. The devil says, you don't have to stay. You don't have to stay where God put you. God put you in a role. God made you a man or a woman. God gave you obligations that go with being a man or a woman, go with being a mother or a father or a son or a daughter. And the devil will tell us, you don't have to stay where God put you. You don't have to respect the boundaries that God has established. The devil doesn't want us to think about passages like 2 John 9, where we're told, don't go onward. Don't go beyond the teaching of Christ. Don't transgress that boundary. But the devil says it's okay to do that. It's okay to go beyond the teaching of Christ. The devil would say, these are extenuating circumstances. Think about Shimei. Shimei might think to himself, well, I remember the king told me I couldn't leave town, but these are extenuating circumstances. The king, surely he never envisioned the possibility that my servants would get away, and, I need them for whatever use he made of them. I need to get them back. Solomon didn't think about this contingency, and so surely his order that I stay home doesn't apply in this case. These are extraordinary times. This is an extenuating circumstance. I can't be expected to stay home when my servants have gone. I've got to go get them. Wouldn't the devil say that about us and our circumstances? If he could talk us into talking ourselves into thinking, we're different. Our case is different. Our situation is not like everybody else's. My situation is the exception to the rule. My situation is extraordinary. My circumstance is extenuating. God, he may have said this, but in this circumstance, God wasn't talking about this circumstance. God doesn't care if in this circumstance, this extraordinary circumstance, maybe I bend his will a little bit. Maybe I transgress a little bit. Maybe I go beyond a boundary a bit because my circumstances are extraordinary. Well, how did that work out for Shimei? Evidently, Solomon didn't think that just because his servants had escaped, that was reason to go against the plain directive that Shimei had been given. And if anything, if you think that Solomon was setting up Shimei, well, then this was the exact circumstance in which the hammer could drop. Maybe Solomon had been patiently waiting for 3 years for something to happen so that he could carry out the wish of David that Solomon take Shimei and bring his gray hair down with blood to Sheol to kill him. Why did God write 30 verses having to do with the story of Shimei? I know Romans 15 verse 4 tells us that the Old Testament was written for our learning. And surely if 30 verses are given to Shimei, there's something to be learned there. Maybe several things to be learned there. And in our extraordinary circumstance now, where we're stuck at home more than we're used to being stuck at home, in fact, we're ordered to stay at home, well, maybe we can identify with Shimei and maybe even learn a lesson or two from him.